A young girl's innocent life cut short in the most chilling and twisted way imaginable. This is the disturbing case of April Jones, a name that still sends shivers down the spine of anyone familiar with her story. April Jones was only 5 years old when she was tragically taken from her family, sparking a nationwide search that would reveal a horrifying truth. Born in 2007 in the small town of Machynlleth, Wales, April was known for her bright smile and her infectious energy. To anyone who knew her, she was just a happy little girl with a love for adventure, playing with her friends and exploring the world around her. Her parents, Coral and Paul Jones, were proud of their little girl, and their community loved her as well. April was the type of child who could light up any room with her laughter, and the close-knit village she lived in was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. It seemed like the perfect place for a child to grow up, a safe and peaceful town where nothing bad could ever happen. But on the evening of October 1st, 2012, that all changed. April had been playing with friends on her street, just a stone's throw from her home. It was a typical day. The sun was setting, and her parents had called her inside for dinner. But as evening fell, April didn't come in. Coral, worried, went outside to look for her, only to find the street empty. She asked neighbors, but no one had seen April since she had been playing just moments before. The police were called, and an investigation was launched immediately. The town was shaken. How could a little girl simply vanish? Where had she gone? What seemed like an innocent evening had turned into a nightmare. The search for April began, and what followed would reveal a twisted, unimaginable tale. The small town, once filled with the sounds of children playing and families chatting, was now filled with police sirens and worried whispers. Every corner was searched, every inch of land covered. The community came together to help find April. But with each passing hour, hope began to fade. Days turned into weeks, and the search seemed endless. The police were doing everything they could, but no one could find April, and no one knew where she could have gone. It was during this time that the true horror of the situation began to unfold. The search efforts, while intense, were unable to reveal any clues about what had happened to the young girl. But as the investigation continued, it became clear that the case was not as simple as a child going missing. The police soon discovered that April's disappearance had been planned, and the person responsible for her abduction was someone who was known to the community, a man who lived just a few streets away from April's home. At first, no one suspected the true horror of what had happened, but the truth was far darker than anyone had imagined. It would be weeks before the police arrested the man who was ultimately responsible for April's tragic fate. But the questions remained. How could someone who had lived in such a peaceful community, surrounded by children and families, be capable of such a twisted and horrific crime? What had driven him to commit such an unimaginable act against an innocent child? And most heartbreaking of all, how could such a young, innocent life be taken so violently, so suddenly, without warning? The chilling details of what happened to April Jones would slowly begin to come to light, and what they revealed was nothing short of disturbing. This is the story of a young girl whose life was cruelly stolen from her, a tale of evil that still haunts the hearts of those who knew her. As the hours turned into days, the search for April intensified. The small town of Machynlleth, known for its tranquility, was now gripped by fear and uncertainty. The community, which had once been a place where everyone knew each other, was now a community living in dread, knowing that one of their own might be responsible for such a vile act. The police quickly began questioning anyone who might have seen April, piecing together the last moments of her life. They spoke to her friends, neighbors, and family, trying to understand where she had gone and who might have seen her last. Despite the relentless effort, no concrete clues were discovered. The investigation quickly expanded beyond Machynlleth, involving local authorities and volunteers. People from all over the region came to help search for April, driven by a sense of duty and a hope that the young girl would be found safe. But as time wore on, the possibility that April might be found alive seemed less and less likely. It became clear that this was no ordinary case of a missing child. There were no signs of struggle, no indication that she had wandered off or gotten lost. The more they searched, the more they realized that April had been taken. The small town was left to grapple with the horrifying truth. Someone had abducted this innocent girl, but who and why? The investigation took a dark turn when the police began to focus their attention on a local man named Mark Bridger. Bridger, a 46-year-old former mechanic, had been living in Machynlleth for several years. He was known to be a bit of an outsider, not very well liked by the people in the town, but no one ever suspected him of anything sinister. He was a quiet man, a loner who kept to himself. But as the search for April continued, new evidence started to surface that pointed toward Bridger. Police discovered that he had been in the area around the time April went missing. Witnesses reported seeing him drive his vehicle near the spot where April was last seen. And then a breakthrough came when Bridger was questioned by police. He claimed to have seen April walking along the street, but his story didn't add up. His version of events was inconsistent, and his behavior seemed suspicious. The more the police dug into Bridger's background, the more unsettling details began to emerge. Bridger had a history of troubling behavior. He had been known to drink excessively and had been involved in previous incidents that raised concerns about his mental state. What shocked investigators the most, however, was the discovery of Bridger's disturbing obsession with young girls. He had a collection of images that were highly inappropriate, including pictures of young children in vulnerable situations. It was becoming clear that Bridger's actions were not just the result of a random crime. They were part of a much darker, deeply troubling pattern. As the police honed in on Bridger, the town's sense of unease grew. People were starting to question how someone so seemingly ordinary could harbor such dark intentions. How could a man who had lived among them for years be capable of committing such an unfathomable crime? As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, the police were now sure that they were dealing with something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. On the night of April 5th, 2012, after days of questioning and mounting evidence, Mark Bridger was arrested in connection with April Jones's disappearance. The arrest, which occurred at his home in the small town, was met with shock and disbelief by the local community. People who had once seen Bridger as just another resident were now confronted with the horrifying reality that one of their own could be behind such a monstrous act. When police searched Bridger's home, they made a chilling discovery. Inside, they found items that would send shockwaves through the entire nation. Among the items were personal belongings of April Jones, her clothes, her shoes, and even her mobile phone. The most disturbing find, however, was a partial confession that Bridger made. In his statement to the police, he claimed that he had accidentally run over April with his car. But as investigators dug deeper, they realized that this was not an accident at all. Bridger's account of events was inconsistent, and he appeared to be hiding the true extent of his involvement. He admitted that he had taken April, but he gave conflicting stories about what happened next. His initial story claimed that he had accidentally killed her, but the details didn't align with the evidence. There were no signs of a car accident, no skid marks on the road, no indication that a vehicle had hit April. The police then discovered the horrific truth. April's body had been dismembered. Mark Bridger had not only abducted her, but he had brutally murdered her and disposed of her body in a way that was unimaginable. He had tried to cover up his crime, removing any traces of April's body that could have led back to him. It was an act of pure evil, one that left the community reeling with disbelief and horror. The details of what happened to April Jones were far worse than anyone could have anticipated. What started as a missing person case had now turned into a nightmare, revealing the twisted, depraved actions of a man who had hidden his true nature from everyone around him. As Bridger was charged with the kidnapping, murder, and dismemberment of April Jones, the country was left to grapple with the horror of what had occurred. It was a crime that defied comprehension, a crime so twisted and evil that it shook the very foundation of a small, peaceful community. And as the trial began, the full extent of Bridger's depravity would be revealed, leaving the world in shock and disbelief. The trial of Mark Bridger began in November 2013, drawing nationwide attention. The courtroom was filled with an eerie tension as people anxiously awaited answers to the many questions that had haunted them since April Jones's tragic disappearance. The trial was set to uncover the full extent of Bridger's actions, and the nation was eager for justice for April and her devastated family. Throughout the trial, the chilling details of April's last moments were revealed. Bridger's defense claimed that the murder had been an accident, a spontaneous act brought on by his panic after accidentally hitting April with his vehicle. He portrayed himself as someone who had acted out of fear and confusion. But the prosecution swiftly tore apart this defense, showing that Bridger's actions were far more deliberate and cold-blooded. Evidence presented during the trial painted a horrifying picture. Bridger had carefully planned April's abduction, and his actions after the kidnapping were calculated and monstrous. He had made no attempt to contact the authorities, no attempt to seek help for the young girl he had abducted. Instead, he chose to conceal his crime, cutting her body into pieces in a way that showed a complete lack of remorse. The brutality of the act left the court in stunned silence. One of the most disturbing pieces of evidence was the phone records, which showed that Bridger had researched violent acts online and had attempted to destroy evidence in the days following April's disappearance. It was clear that his criminal behavior had been premeditated, and the idea that this had been an accident seemed utterly implausible. But perhaps the most heartbreaking part of the trial was hearing from April's family. Her mother, Coral, and her father, Paul, gave emotional testimonies about the pain they had endured since the night their daughter vanished. The loss was immeasurable, and the grief they spoke of was felt deeply by everyone in the courtroom. No words could undo the tragedy, but the family expressed their hope that the trial would bring them a step closer to closure. The community of Machynlleth was rocked to its core, as many had once seen Mark Bridger as an ordinary man, someone they never suspected could commit such a horrific act. As the evidence mounted, it became increasingly clear that Bridger was not just a man who had made a mistake. He was a predator, someone who had taken the life of an innocent child without a second thought. Bridger's behavior during the trial added to the sense of horror. He showed no remorse, never once apologizing to April's family or expressing any regret for his actions. His cold demeanor throughout the proceedings was chilling, making it clear that he had no empathy for the suffering he had caused. For April's family, it was a painful reminder of the cruelty their daughter had endured in her final moments. In the end, the jury convicted Mark Bridger of the kidnapping and murder of April Jones. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 35 years before being eligible for parole. The verdict was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow. While justice had been served, it could never bring back the young girl whose life had been taken so violently. As Bridger was led away in handcuffs, April's family was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The pain of losing a child, especially in such a brutal way, was something that could never fully heal. The trial had brought some sense of justice, but the emotional scars would remain forever. The murder of April Jones had a profound impact on the UK, sparking a nationwide conversation about child protection, safety, and the dangers lurking in seemingly peaceful communities. The case prompted public outcry over the failure to recognize warning signs in individuals like Mark Bridger, who, despite his criminal history, had lived undetected within the community for years. In the aftermath of April's death, many people questioned how someone like Bridger could slip through the cracks. He had a history of troubling behavior, including a previous conviction for possessing indecent images of children, yet he had been allowed to live in the community without raising suspicion. How could a man with such a dark past be trusted around children? The The case sparked debates about the effectiveness of monitoring known offenders and whether enough was being done to protect vulnerable children from predators like Bridger. April's tragic story also led to calls for changes in the way missing persons cases were handled. Many felt that the response to her disappearance had been slow and disorganized, leading to unnecessary delays in the investigation. If the authorities had acted more swiftly, could April have been saved? These questions lingered long after the trial had ended. As part of the national reflection, child protection organizations rallied to push for stronger laws and more stringent measures to protect children from harm. The case became a catalyst for reform, with a focus on improving child safety and preventing future tragedies. April's parents, Coral and Paul, despite their immense grief, used their voices to advocate for other children. They became involved in campaigns to improve child safety, and their strength in the face of unimaginable loss inspired many. They wanted April's death to have meaning, to prevent other families from experiencing the same pain they had endured. But for them, the loss was too much to bear. No amount of reform, no amount of public support could ever bring their daughter back. They lived each day with the haunting memory of their precious girl, her laughter, her smile, and the bright future she would never have. April Jones's story became a tragic symbol of the vulnerability of children, of how easily innocence can be shattered by evil. Her name will forever be associated with the fight for justice, the importance of child protection, and the reminder that no community, no matter how peaceful it seems, is immune to the dangers that exist in the world. As for Mark Bridger, he remains behind bars, serving his sentence for the brutal murder of a young child. His name, too, will be remembered, but for all the wrong reasons, a reminder of the evil that can exist within seemingly ordinary people. April's legacy lives on through the efforts of those who continue to fight for a safer world for children. And though her life was tragically cut short, her story has inspired change, ensuring that her death was not in vain. April Jones's case didn't just shock a small town or the UK. It rippled across the world, shining a spotlight on the vulnerabilities faced by children in even the safest communities. Her tragic death became a critical turning point for how we view child safety, criminal behavior, and the responsibility of society to protect its youngest members. Though April's life was taken too soon, the ripples of her story would continue to change the lives of countless others. In the years following the trial, one of the most notable impacts of April's case was the increased awareness around child abduction and the importance of swift, organized responses. Her family, despite their grief, became advocates for improving systems and procedures when a child goes missing. They pushed for reforms that would allow authorities to respond more quickly, ensuring that no other family would have to endure the same pain and uncertainty that they did. In honor of April, several charity initiatives and awareness campaigns were launched to raise funds for missing children's organizations and to improve public understanding of child safety. In addition to practical changes, April's story also brought about deep cultural conversations regarding the issue of pedophilia, criminal behavior, and societal blind spots. Mark Bridger, who was not a stranger to the authorities and had a history of troubling behavior, was a stark example of how someone with a criminal background could slip through the cracks. People began to demand stricter laws and monitoring of offenders, especially those who were found guilty of crimes involving children. There was a growing push for tighter community oversight, more stringent checks on known offenders, and greater resources for psychological assessments for people like Bridger, who seemed to have been living in plain sight, undetected. The tragedy also stirred a significant dialogue about the flaws in the criminal justice system, particularly in how cases involving sexual offenses and abuse are handled. Many advocates for child protection called for a reevaluation of the justice system's handling of offenders with a history of abusing minors. The public wanted to know how many more could be out there, hiding their twisted intentions under the mask of normalcy. April's story also brought forth a broader conversation about the trauma faced by victims and their families. Her parents, Coral and Paul, were left with a loss so profound that no words could ever truly express the depth of their grief. Yet, in the face of their pain, they found the courage to speak out. They became vocal advocates for child protection, even though they had been through an unimaginable personal hell. Their decision to use their suffering as a catalyst for change was a shining example of the resilience of the human spirit, despite the scars left by such a profound tragedy. While the grief and trauma for April's family will never fully fade, their strength and dedication to ensuring April's legacy lives on serves as a beacon of hope for others in similar situations. By turning their pain into action, they became a voice for the voiceless, striving to ensure that no other child would fall prey to the same fate as April. But for the town of Machynlleth, and for all those who had known April, her death would always leave a hole that couldn't be filled. The horror of what happened could never be erased from their memory, and the shadow of Mark Bridger's twisted actions would always linger over their once peaceful community. The image of a 5-year-old girl stolen away in the most brutal way imaginable was a tragedy that no one in the town would ever forget. As time passed, people continued to remember April not just as a victim, but as a symbol of the fight for a better, safer world. Her story sparked calls for stronger protection laws, more accountability for known offenders, and a better, more coordinated response to missing children. And though her life was stolen from her too soon, her name became a reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and action in the face of evil. April's case, while deeply tragic, is not just a story of loss. It is a story of action. It is a story of how one small girl's life changed the way we look at child safety and criminal accountability. Her legacy is a reminder that we cannot afford to turn a blind eye to the dangers lurking in our communities, no matter how peaceful they may seem. It is a call to action, urging us all to protect the vulnerable and to never stop fighting for justice for those who cannot fight for themselves. The case also serves as a tragic reminder of the impact that one individual's evil actions can have on a whole community. It is not just the victim who suffers, but also the families, friends, and entire neighborhoods. Communities, like Machynlleth, are forever changed when such a crime is committed. And though the pain may dull with time, the scars left by such horrific acts remain forever. For April's parents, though they may never fully heal, they continue to carry her memory forward. They continue to stand up for what is right, using their own grief to make a difference. It is their strength that ensures that April Jones's name will never be forgotten. Her story will continue to echo through time, urging us all to reflect on the importance of protecting our children, of standing up for justice, and of ensuring that every innocent life is valued and safeguarded. As the years go by, the fight for child protection continues, and with each new law, each new voice raised, and each new campaign for safety, April's legacy endures. The horrors of her death may never fade, but the lessons learned from her case will hopefully make the world a little safer for the children of tomorrow. Her death may have been tragic, but the steps we take in her name can lead to a brighter, safer future for generations to come. Let us all remember April Jones, not just as a victim, but as a symbol of hope, action, and a brighter, safer world for all children. Thank you for hearing April Jones's story. Let's honor her memory by ensuring no child faces such a fate.